So here we are in the White House in Stansfield, formerly Bellevue, and I was informed by my host, or our hosts today, a few weeks ago, it was once the Bellevue School for Girls, going back quite a lot of years.
1850s.
1850s. So now the White House, and first of all, must thank Rod and Jane for inviting poetry people into the house on a Sunday morning out of the middle of nowhere. Really appreciate you doing this. In June 1922, Siegfried Sassoon recorded in his diary, "A sunshiny day, and there was little Blunden in his shabby blue suit. He had just picked up a first edition of Atlanta and Caledon for $1 in a little shop in Clare. And outside the station sat Mary B. in a small blue cloak, in a tiny ramshackle wagonette drawn by a small white pony. Slowly we traversed the 4 miles to Stansfield, up and down little hills, among acres of beans and wheat, arrived at Bellevue, a stone-faced, slate-roofed box of a house by the roadside. And for 3 days B and I talked about county cricket and the war and English poetry and our own poetry and East Anglia and our contemporaries. My visit consolidated our friendliness, and I feel now that I understand him completely and admire him more than ever." So welcome to the White House, where Edmund Blunden and his wife Mary and their 2 young children, John and Claire, lived in the early 1920s. Now, this morning we're going to celebrate the friendship of these 2 men, these 2 great World War I poets, and also commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Armistice. And shortly, Margi is going to talk to us about that enduring friendship of over 4 decades between the 2 men. Edmund Blunden came to Suffolk in 1918 to oversee a court-martial in Bury St Edmunds. In the evening, his retinue visited Newmarket, where a young barmaid called Mary Danes caught his eye. They were soon to be married. At the time, they lived at Bellevue. They had 2 children, John and Claire. Edmund took an active role in village life here at Stansfield, playing football and his beloved cricket for the village, as well as editing the village magazine. Now, Takeshi Saito had visited Edmund in Stansfield in January 1924. He was the Japanese professor who recruited Edmund for the job of Professor of English at Tokyo University in 1924. And this is where Edmund would eventually write Undertones of War, his fantastic memoir on the First World War and its poems. Edmund agreed to take up the position and travelled alone to Japan, Mary having decided to stay in Stansfield with the children. He penned a small piece of verse to Takeshi Saito on the flyleaf of a book written by the rector of Stansfield, the Reverend A.F. Webling, author of several books on spiritualism and local history. And in the flyleaf of one of Webling's books, sent to Takeshi Saito, was a very small poem, just a few lines really, and it's about the walk from this house to the church at the other end of the village. And imagine this is January, so this is a cold day, and it's a very short poem that he wrote in this flyleaf. "The way was long, the church was cold, but Webling spoke out loud and bold, and Saito in the closing hymn sang like a dozen cherubim." Lovely.